from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew. Tonight, Washington gridlocked without an easy way out.
The House is done. The ball is now in the Senate's court. It does us no good to be here dithering on show votes. We did it. We sent the product over. It is clean. It is 24 pages in length. It's the most bare minimum that's necessary to keep the lights on for the people.
House Democrats are here at the Capitol on duty and ready to reopen the government.
The tumultuous situation on Capitol Hill tonight with yet another vote on Republican and Democratic spending bills, both failing in the Senate as we mark the fourth longest shutdown now in U.S. history. Now, lack of pay, the potential of permanent job losses and more hitting the federal workforce across the country while tensions rise among lawmakers. So what comes next? Is there a way for the parties to come together? We've got someone on deck who may hold some of those answers when House Speaker Mike Johnson joins us just moments from now. Plus, a view from the other side of the Capitol when Republican Senator Mike Rounds speaks with us, and how top Democrats are strategizing a path forward when we sit down with House Minority Whip, Congresswoman Katherine Clark. Also, former FBI Director James Comey pleading not guilty in an effort by the Justice Department to target the president's adversaries. Comey's plea coming as the president calls for the jailing of Illinois Democrats. We'll have all the details. We begin this evening, though, with the ongoing shutdown that is now extended beyond a week, becoming the fourth longest shutdown in American history, with no signs of ending. While there is not a solution to reopen the government at this hour, there is, however, a simmering tension impacting lawmakers on both sides, as we've been hearing throughout the day. And we saw a true glimpse of that during an altercation that just took place between Republican Congressman Mike Lawler and Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Take a listen.
You're embarrassing yourself right now.
Do you want to cut the standard deduction in half?
The largest cut to Medicaid in American history. You voted for that.
Fraud and abuse, by the way.
You voted
Tom DiNapoli, the Democratic controller of New York.
Let me ask you a question.
Pointed out that $1.2 billion were wasted.
Listen, you're not going to talk. You're not going to talk to me. You're not going to talk to me and talk over me
New York
because you don't want to hear what I have to say.
Oh, I'm listening.
So why don't you just keep your mouth shut?
Oh,
because you showed up.
Is that the way to talk?
You showed up.
Yeah.
And so you voted for this one big ugly bill.
This. You can extend it right now.
A permanent extension of massive tax breaks.
To be clear, Congressman Lawler approached Leader Jeffries as he was emerging from the Minority Leader's office to start that back and forth, and that was just a taste. It went on for many more minutes. Joining us now for a look into how Democrats are approaching the ongoing shutdown is the House Minority Whip, Democratic Congresswoman Katherine Clark of Massachusetts. Congresswoman, it's great to have you here on Bloomberg TV and radio. It's startling to watch these videos. We also saw two Democratic senators stand in front of the Speaker's office to demand the swearing in of a new Congresswoman from Arizona. Is decorum out the window, Congresswoman? Are we officially off the tracks?
We are officially off the tracks because we have a situation where we have been asking Republicans to come to the negotiating table, address this health care crisis, sit down, put the American people at the center of our work here and get to work for them. And instead, what we've seen are kind of these ambush politics that Mike Lawler's trying to do. It doesn't help anybody except for Mike Lawler. Let's end this Republican shutdown. Let's address soaring health care costs for families, the historic cuts that Republicans have made to Medicaid and to Medicare and to the ACA, and get to work to make sure that health care is affordable for every single family and doesn't become a luxury item.
I spoke earlier with the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, Jason Smith, who, of course, is bringing a very different side of the story to the table here. He calls this, like many Republicans do, the Schumer shutdown. And here's what he told me earlier today.
It's disturbing. There's no winners here. The people that's losing is the American public. I said at the very beginning, if the Democrats force the shutdown, it will probably be longer than the prior shutdown, which was 35 days, because the Democrats will have to vote for the bill that they have continued to vote against now 6 times.
Republicans continue to tell us, Congresswoman, that Democrats are holding the budget, holding the government hostage by not clearing the CR and allowing then negotiations to begin on some of the things you've been asking for, like an extension of Obamacare subsidies. How do you respond to him?
Well, that's a lot to take from Jason Smith when Republicans aren't even showing up for work. So they're saying to the American people, we have come into office on a promise to lower your costs. We did just the opposite. We made everything harder and more expensive. And at the center of that is we cut 20 million people off of insurance, and premium notices are going out right now that are double or triple what it cost people to get coverage last year because we cut off the ACA tax credits. All at the same time to take all this money and give it to permanent tax breaks to the very, very wealthiest. And to the people who are having to work in this Republican shutdown without pay, they're saying we're going to collect our pay and not come to work on your behalf. It's our way. You either are pro-billionaire or you are going to have to live with a shutdown, which each day they threaten to make even more painful to American workers. It is so upside down and outrageous. Come to the table, end this shutdown, negotiate around making health care affordable. Healthcare should be a right in this country. And when 60% of American families are unable to provide the basics, to come into office in January on a promise of lowering costs and do just the opposite is such a betrayal of the American people and what they need from Congress and this president at this time.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, we talk to lawmakers from both sides of the aisle every day here, Congresswoman, and we're glad to have your voice as part of that conversation. I just keep hearing from both sides that everyone thinks they have the moral high ground here, and I wonder if you agree with Jason Smith that this could be a record. We have no signs of this ending, do we?
I mean, I don't know how the Republicans even are looking themselves in the mirror. Where is the moral high ground of coming in and taking away Medicaid that pays for 40% of the health care for children in this country, 40% of all births, that is a lifeline for families that we're hearing from, like Teresa, who came to Washington to tell us about her 2 autistic twin sons who are totally reliant on Medicaid for their very survival, and allows her to be home and be a full-time caretaker for them as a single mom. So, you know, when we talk about basing this in morals, what is immoral here is to take that kind of healthcare support from cancer survivors, from moms, from veterans. Almost 300,000 veterans will lose their health care with this ACA premium hikes that the Republicans have engineered, and say, we are taking these cuts for what? To give permanent tax breaks to the very wealthy. We have to build an economy here that gives everybody a floor, a safety net on which they can build success and have no ceiling to that success. That's the moral argument that we're going to make and stand tall in making for the American people.
Well, I do appreciate where you stand on that, Congresswoman. Republicans say to us that they're ready to talk to you about extending Obamacare subsidies, but we need to reopen the government first, that's an issue that can be hammered out between now and the end of the year. Democrats always say that it's too late, that notices are already going out and rates are rising, but the government's still closed in the meantime. So how do we get out of this?
Well, they have to come to the table. We have been asking them for months to not do these cuts, to reinstate these tax credits. Come to the table, talk to us. They chose instead to stonewall not just us, but the American people until we were in a shutdown. And now they're saying, trust us. by November 20th, we'll be ready to negotiate on this. That doesn't make any sense. Nothing that they have done by canceling votes, refusing to even pay, as we've always agreed in a shutdown, to pay our troops, gives us any confidence that if we said, okay, we'll reopen government and then talk, that they have any intention of doing that. Make some good faith gesture to us that you are willing to fight for the American people and the health care they deserve.
Well, you mentioned the troops, and as you know, we're looking at the 15th as the next stop in the pay cycle here. To what extent might that help to start moving the gears here? Obviously, all lawmakers seem to agree that they don't want troops to be going without pay. There has been an idea that a separate piece of legislation, in fact, be considered. I know the Speaker doesn't want to see that happen, but are you worried the pressure will be too great on Democrats by the time military checks begin lapsing?
You know, we have always come together before shutdowns, however hard we may be locked in on positions, have disagreements about the shutdown, and prioritize paying our troops. We've done that before. We did it in a bipartisan way with a unanimous vote in the House, but not with this administration and these particular Republicans in Congress. Not only did they not do that, Speaker Johnson called it a show vote to pay the people who are actively defending our country. That shows you the disrespect and disregard. This is about continuing to rig a system for the very wealthy at the expense of everyone else, including our troops.
House Minority Whip, Democratic Congresswoman Katherine Clark from Massachusetts. We thank you for your views, Congresswoman. Come back and see us again on Bloomberg. Joining us now with their reaction is this evening's political panel. We'll hear a couple times this evening from Bloomberg Politics contributor Adam Hodge, who's managing director at Bully Pulpit International, our Democratic strategist. Here as well, Republican strategist Sarah Chamberlain, the president and CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. I'll remind everybody that coming up, our conversation with the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, will loom large in our coverage this evening. It's great to have both of you with us. Sarah, I'll start with you since we just heard the line from the Democratic Party here. I've got to be honest with you, and we've talked about this at every step of the game here. Passions are running higher. Anger is running higher than I've heard it from both sides of the aisle. Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely, which is one of the reasons the Speaker does have the Republicans home. They're not on vacation. They're working their districts. I mean, I hate it when they're like, well, they're not working if they're not in D.C. Yeah. They're home talking to their constituents, doing a lot of things back in their districts. But the tempers are running high. And the Mike Lawler, that argument today was about a bill I mentioned last week. There is an ACA fix bill that has been introduced on a bipartisan level. That's what he was bringing up to the minority leaders. Like, what are we doing? What are the Democrats doing? The bill has already been introduced. There are senators who are talking about introducing a version of it over there. Like, let's get the government open and let's get ACA fixed.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Congresswoman Clark said, but would you entertain a bill like that, a standalone piece of legislation to resolve this Obamacare issue?
I mean, I think the important thing to remember, though, right now we're having this conversation on the Democrats' terms. We're talking about health care, and that is a far cry from what people thought, going on 10 days ago.
So you think you're winning the messaging?
I think it's true, and polls seem to be blaming Trump and the White House and the Republicans more than the Democrats for this shutdown. I think that Democrats have been clear. They're on the high ground here because they're fighting for giving people health care and preventing premiums from going up. And so I think if there was any real trust, Katherine Clark alluded to it a little bit, that if there was some that there was a real negotiation around health care, that they would be for a real negotiation. But the math in the Senate remains the math in the Senate. You need 60 votes. The Republicans cannot pass anything that keep the government open, to bring it open without Democrats on board. And the Democrats have said is we want health care.
We're not passing the clean CR without negotiating health care reform. Would the promise for, or maybe a sideline deal, get Democrats to reopen the government and then vote on extending subsidies?
I think there would have to be.
There's got to be all one package.
I think health care has to go first. And this,
first.
I think so, because then this is key. The process that has unfolded over the last 6 months. And not to get too inside D.C. baseball, but between the rescissions where the White House has, after passing a budget that had Democratic votes, work with Republicans on a partisan basis to pull money back that they already voted for. And then impounding money, taking money that was the government and just not giving it to agencies, has totally poisoned the well with Democrats that they're going to do anything above board when it comes to negotiations. So no, there's no trust, unfortunately,
We've established that
right here. And so what Democrats are expecting is come to the table, negotiate on health care, fix this issue that you created in the first place, and then we'll play ball on the shutdown.
I remember Brendan Boyle being on the program saying one more rescissions package and it shuts down. And there was one more and we're shut down. Just the trust issue. You're part of the Main Street Partnership. You're used to sitting people down and talking through issues.
Sure.
How do we get beyond the bad blood here?
I don't know, because I have to say, in the years I've done this job, it is the worst I've seen it. But we have to negotiate, okay, let's take the vote to reopen the government, and then the next vote could be the ACA vote. But you're not going to see them in reverse. I mean, Republicans control the House and Senate. We really feel strongly that this is Chuck Schumer's, he's afraid of the far left. I was here in March when we talked about this. I said he got really criticized for his votes, moving the votes to keep the government open. He's afraid of AOC primarying him. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. I know they're talking about health care, but that's really, he's afraid. You saw it back in March, and you're seeing it now. Because I am sure they could negotiate, open up. The next vote could be the ACA vote. It's there. And both sides, even the president, has said, we support this.
What Adam just described, though, is a non-starter for Republicans in the House, right?
I believe it is at this point.
Vote first on health care, then on the CR. Right. What if they became one big bill?
Don't know. That's not being talked about yet. It may be as this continues to go on, because I agree. I don't see how this reopens. Maybe. But that would be the senators having to talk about it. Sure. You know, the Republicans in the House, they did their job. They voted for the CR. This is really a Senate play. And maybe the senators can negotiate. I just don't see Chuck Schumer willing to do that at this point.
And maybe Mike Johnson, you asked him that question coming up on this hour, right?
Now,
I mean,
as a matter of fact.
That's, I think, a question. Will he actually give that a vote? I have some serious doubts. But he has a part in this to play, and I think he's played the politics so far by keeping his members out and not able to negotiate on key things the right way. It's been an unforced error.
Great conversation with Adam Hodge and Sarah Chamberlain. They're going to be standing by to talk with us more a bit later this hour. And joining us now, as we promised, live from Capitol Hill, is the U.S. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Welcome back to Bloomberg TV and Radio, Mr. Speaker. Been looking forward to the conversation. And I appreciate your time this evening. I'm sure you're having a ball and you don't want this to end anytime soon, but I'm just wondering what your gut check is here and how long you think this is going to go on.
This is a very frustrating exercise for us. It's no fun at all, Joe, and that's because real Americans are feeling real harm because of this. It's political games being played by Democrats in the Senate. There is one reason and one reason alone that they have all just magically changed their tune. I mean, they've done a 180-degree turn from what they have always said and done emphatically in keeping the government open. They said as recently as March of this year, we're playing the highlight reel tape outside the Speaker's office right now. They all said in their own words, you can't shut the government down. It's too painful. Something changed. What changed was the political calculation. Chuck Schumer is worried about, as was just said, an attack or a challenge from his left flank. He's afraid that the Marxist wave in New York is going to take him over as well because he represents that state. And so he's got to pick a fight with Trump and show that he's fighting. Well, they picked a fight that has nothing to do with stopgap funding. They're talking about the Obamacare subsidies, for example. That's a December 31 policy issue. We were always going to negotiate that and debate it and deliberate over it in October, November. That always has been on the schedule, and they know that, but they're trying to pretend that's the issue of the day. It's not. It's a red herring. It's a distraction. They're not doing their jobs, and real Americans are getting hurt.
Well, we spoke just a few moments ago with Congresswoman Katherine Clark, who said, we just want a gesture, Mr. Speaker. Would you consider a promise to bring that negotiated legislation to a floor vote, up or down? We'll make sure that happens before the end of the year.
The Speaker of the House is in no position to project forward what the outcome of a big policy debate is going to be. That'd be unprecedented for anyone to do that, and I won't. What we have told them is the obvious fact that there are ongoing negotiations and discussions going on today between Republicans and Democrats, and certainly within our own caucuses, about how some of that would need to be reformed. Look, there's a lot of conservatives who have real problems with the Obamacare subsidy, okay? When the government subsidizes something, it means it's not working. It's like the EV mandates, you know? People didn't want to buy electric vehicles. The government said, we'll give you $7,500 cash if you do, and they still didn't buy enough of them, right? When the government subsidizes something, it means the market's not working. Obamacare was supposed to bring down the cost of health care. Premiums have skyrocketed since it was created in 2010. They're up like 60%. So something's not working. There's real reforms that are needed. But it's a complex issue that takes a lot of time for members on both sides of the aisle and in both chambers to negotiate. They're trying to short-circuit all that right now. That's not how this process works. The Clean CR is so simple, Joe. It's 24 pages in length. It has exactly 0 Republican policy riders on it. We made it so simple. We just said, do what you've always done. Let's keep the lights on and keep the appropriations and the negotiation process going. They refuse to do it because, again, they want to show a fight because they can't stand President Trump. That's what this is. And in the meantime, American people are being used as pawns in this game, and it is so frustrating to us. I think it's shameful. I think it's immoral for them to do what they're doing right now.
Well, I know your position on that, and, you know, we hear about the Schumer shutdown a lot around here. Tom Emmer was with us just a couple of days ago making the point, and we've heard this over the past couple of weeks. But what happens if Chuck Schumer doesn't come around for you? What happens if weeks go by, if members of the military are not being paid? Are there off-ramps here for you, Mr. Speaker? Will you start reaching out directly to Democrats? Do we need another meeting in the Oval Office?
Look, I am a good faith operator. I am a negotiator. I like to find common ground. Here's the problem. Because we were operating in good faith and doing the most basic, simple thing, I mean the bare minimum piece of legislation to keep the lights on, I literally don't have anything to negotiate on the CR. I can't go into that document and say, oh, let me pull off these Republican priorities and see if we can get some more Democrats to vote on it. I don't have anything to pull off of it. I sent over a clean continuing resolution, and by the way, very important, it continues Biden-era policies and spending, which we conservatives don't like. We're trying to change that, but we need the appropriations process to finish it. All we needed was 7 more weeks on the clock to finish the process. And the Republicans and Democrats who are appropriators are the ones that decided that date and decided it should be clean. And everything was going smoothly until Chuck Schumer decided to blow it up. Is he going to fold? I don't know. But I'll tell you what needs to happen. Some other Senate Democrats need to come to their senses and realize they should not be blamed for the pain that's being inflicted on the people. Make it stop as soon as possible. Do the right thing. And join your Republican colleagues and open the government back up.
That's why I ask if you're reaching out to some of the Democratic senators. Mr. Speaker, have you talked to Chuck Schumer since your Oval Office meeting?
No, not since the Oval Office meeting, but I'll tell you what, the president made an impassioned plea while we were there to please not do this. Please don't shut the government down, Chuck. And he was spurned, and Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries walked out defiantly. You know, they wanted to pick this fight. It's very clear. The question everybody's asking is how long? October 15th, troops begin to lose a real paycheck. And you've got TSA agents and Border Patrol agents and all these people sacrificing their own safety to protect everyone else, and they won't be paid. You've got nutrition programs and health services and FEMA services and all sorts of other things stalled. And half the civilian workforce of the federal government is now furloughed. This is dangerous stuff. Real people are being hurt. Air traffic controllers are falling back on the job because they don't have enough personnel. This is serious stuff. And we need the Democrats to come to their senses and do the right thing.
Well, of course, there's a threat of mass layoffs coming from the president. He said maybe 4 or 5 days he would make a decision on that. But there's also been a conversation, and I heard you speaking earlier in your briefing about back pay for federal workers who have been furloughed. There's, of course, a law on the books around furloughed workers getting back pay today. And I know that you have been speaking to the letter of the law. The president yesterday said, though, that there are some federal workers who do not deserve, the quote was, to be taken care of. Is this issue the purview of Congress? Do you plan to follow this law, or is this somehow up to Russ Vogt now?
Well, look, there's different legal analyses that are floating around right now, and I've been so busy with this, I haven't had a chance to dig into it. I am a lawyer. I'm looking forward to reading through that because I kind of get into all the scholarship side of this. It has always been my understanding that the law requires furloughed workers to receive back pay, and of course that's been the tradition. And I'm not sure exactly what the president is referring to there. I haven't had a chance to talk to him about that specific issue yet, but we will. I can tell you this, though. The view of the White House, the view of the president himself, is that he doesn't want federal workers to be used as pawns here. We've got some great patriotic Americans who work for our agencies and provide essential services to the people. They should not suffer the harms of people who want to play political games. And I think it's a really important principle for us to advance.
Do you worry about mass layoffs coming as early as next week and that actually poisoning the well even more between Republicans and Democrats? What would be the impact of a move like that?
Well, look, I'm worried about all sorts of adverse effects because of how it affects the American people. We had some analysis today that every week that the Democrat shutdown continues, we could lose $15 billion in gross domestic product. I mean, it's a real hit for real people, and it has a reverberating effect. And if you keep it closed for a month, then one of the estimates I saw today is you lose 43,000 civilian employees, because it has a ripple effect throughout the economy. We can't afford to do that right now. Things were going in the right direction, and this is a terrible setback for the country. It also has implications for national security. I mean, you look at things like nuclear deterrence. Those programs are stalled right now, right? And every day you do that, it has real-world consequences for us. Not a game, and we need to end it right now.
I know that you've said to House Republicans, at least reportedly, that you would give them 48 hours notice if they had to come back into town when folks left following the vote on the CR in the House. If they're talking next door in the Senate, if some sort of deal is brokered that might alter the CR as it stands now, do you plan to call your members back?
Look, the devil's in the details, but I don't know how they could possibly alter it. We made it so simple. There's nothing to take off of that. It is virtually identical to what Chuck Schumer himself championed in March of this year. And so we're not going to strap on extraneous policy issues and all of that would take a long time because the government's now closed down. They need to pass the clean CR, turn the lights back on, and get everybody back to work. I'm just so frustrated with the nonsense around this. And I think more and more people at home are as well. I saw a Rasmussen poll that came out a couple of hours ago. 49% of the American people were polled said that Democrats did this to give benefits to illegal aliens. They are not wrong. $200 billion in their counterproposal would pay illegal aliens the benefits that hard-working American taxpayers provide. We're not doing that. We're not going to add $1.5 trillion new dollars to spending. We're not taking Chuck Schumer's ridiculous counterproposal. We're going to do the right thing for the people, and the Republicans are on the job to do it.
I know you had a couple of visitors at your office today, Mr. Speaker. A couple of Democratic senators, I believe Kelly and Gallego, had a lot of things to say about the swearing in of a new member of Congress from Arizona. I also saw Congressman Mike Lawler from New York get into an altercation with Hakeem Jeffries as he was coming out of his office here. I know that elbows can be sharp on Capitol Hill, but Mr. Speaker, what's happened to decorum? Is this a new low?
Look, I work on decorum around here all the time. Everybody knows that's my record. I started it when I came to Washington in January 2017. I authored the Honor and Civility Caucus Pledge and the Commitment to Civility. I mean, we have to maintain this. There are fights about policy, but it shouldn't be personal. I try to model that myself. I try to, encourage colleagues to do it. But I will tell you the tension here is very high because it's high because the stakes are so high. And you got real Americans, real constituents back home who are really suffering because of the nonsense. And it gets us upset here sometimes. I understand that emotion. We've got to keep it in check. We've got to get everybody working together, and we've got to get the lights back on.
I want to ask you about that new member, Grijalva, the Congresswoman-elect from Arizona. The senators were asking you to swear her in, or I guess they were urging you to swear her in, which I know you've done a couple of times for Republican members in pro forma sessions. These two senators were yelling about Jeffrey Epstein, I think, to make a point here, and they did get some coverage on that. Mr. Speaker, is this an Epstein issue or is this a process issue?
No, they're masters at distraction. And go back and watch the video of Senator Rubin Gallego. These are the two Democrat senators from Arizona, Mark Kelly and Gallego, and they're voting to keep the government closed. I told them if you want to get your House colleague from your state take the oath of office, then open the government so we can get back to regular session. They claim everything's about Epstein. It's a joke. Masters of distraction. We did. This is a long-standing tradition in the Congress. When you administer the oath after a special election, you do it at the first time that the Congress is back in session after that. We did change that, modify it earlier this year. On one occasion, we had two Floridians who came in on the same special election, but it was a very different set of circumstances. I explained to them very quickly. We had a scheduled date for the oath of office ceremony. The House went out of session unexpectedly. They already had their family and friends here, and it was already prearranged, so we just went ahead and went through the motion. We're going to Rep-elect Grijalva will be sworn in as soon as we get back to regular session. She never had a scheduled date because she got elected after the House went out of session. This is real simple. We're going to do that as soon as we get back, but they are in charge of turning the lights on so Congress can get back to work.
Well, I appreciate your answering that for us, Mr. Speaker. Lastly, if you were to join me, say, next Wednesday. Would we be having the same conversation about a shutdown?
I am on my knees praying that we would not be. We have got to get the government operating again. It's the most basic function of the federal government is to serve the people, keep the people safe, and keep the lights on. And we need the Democrats over here to see the light and do that.
We appreciate the conversation. House Speaker Mike Johnson, thank you. You're always welcome on Bloomberg TV and radio. Joining us now in our Washington bureau to discuss the Speaker's remarks and the status of this shutdown is Bloomberg's Megan Scully, who runs our Capitol Influence team. It's great to see you, Megan, because we have no end in sight to this. The Speaker doesn't seem to see off-ramps either.
Absolutely not. One of the things I thought was so interesting in your interview with him just now is, asking about bringing the ACA subsidies to the floor. He did not commit to doing so. And the issue here is what is called the Hastert rule, which is not technically a rule, but it's more of a tradition in the House, where a speaker will not bring something to the floor if it does not have the support of the majority of the majority. And the concern here, and the concern that Democrats are airing, is that Johnson won't bring it to the floor because it could violate that rule.
Fascinating. So the negotiations may not matter. Either way, he's still calling this the Schumer shutdown. It's up to Chuck Schumer to come around. Democrats think they're winning the messaging war. Wouldn't that suggest a much more prolonged shutdown?
I think that we're looking at the likelihood of this going on for a week, maybe more.
Wow.
Of course, something could change overnight, and we could be having a very different conversation tomorrow. But right now, we're looking at perhaps both chambers being out of session next week. The Senate has a scheduled recess for next week, and there has not been any announcement that they are revising that schedule.
What do you think of the Speaker's answer to my question about back pay for federal workers? It does seem that this law that Donald Trump signed in 2019 is somehow up for debate.
So, when we have gotten out of government shutdowns in the past, Congress has always attached language to the CRs, to the stopgap spending bills, granting back pay to these furloughed workers. In 2019, after that arduous 35-day shutdown, there was a standalone law that made this the rule of the land. Now the White House is questioning that because of an amendment that was added to that further down the road. Democrats are saying that's a technicality. This is this law is still in effect. It's going to be an interesting debate to watch play out. I'll be curious to see whether the White House pursues this any further. We've seen Trump put firings out there, and that has not happened just yet. So it's a question of whether this is a threat or whether this is something they're really following through on.
The matter of military pay is a slightly different one. That pay cycle hits on October 15th, and there has been a question. Katherine Clark spoke pretty passionately about it, about whether a separate piece of legislation should be passed to pay the troops. The Speaker's not on board with that. He says we already passed that bill. It was the CR.
Yes.
So is this dead in the water?
It certainly seems to be. It is something that could come to the House floor and be passed by unanimous consent, even when they're in what's just called a pro forma session, when members aren't back. Of course, one person would object, and then that would be dead. So, but it would be seemingly something that could get bipartisan support if the Speaker, who controls the House floor, were to bring it up.
All right. So what should we be looking for? More voting? We're going to do this every day in the Senate, as we did again today. John Thune had essentially promised as much.
Yeah, they're 0 for 6 right now.
Yes, they are.
Both parties are 0 for 6, I should say, because they voted 6 times on both the Democratic bill and on the Republican bill. We do seem to be sort of in this perpetual cycle. I'll be curious to see if, of course, there are any bipartisan talks that come up. Certainly doesn't seem to be the case. The clip that you showed at the beginning of the show with Hakeem Jeffries and Mike Lawler.
Even I was anxious watching it.
Yeah, and those are two lawmakers who tend to be pretty even-keeled.
Right.
Really going at it in the Capitol doesn't give me a lot of hope that we're going to be having, real high-level bipartisan talks, but we're certainly on the lookout for that. And then the big question is the Senate going to be here next week or not?
These are big questions that we can't answer yet, against the backdrop of a lot of stress and anger on the Hill. Megan Scully, thank you so much for being with us. We'll discuss more of our interview with Speaker Johnson when our political panel joins us in a bit. But a few miles from here, just down the Potomac River in Alexandria, Virginia, another major political story is playing out that could have reaching implications after former FBI Director James Comey pleaded not guilty to charges that he lied to congressional lawmakers and obstructed proceedings, setting up a trial early next year that'll delve into the federal prosecution of one of President Trump's biggest perceived enemies. Joining us now with the details surrounding Comey's court appearance today, Bloomberg's Myles Miller. No perp walk today, Myles. No news conference. Comey's lawyers say they're going to try to have this case dismissed. Is that what takes place?
Yeah, they're calling it vindictive prosecution. It will not be seen yet if that is going to stick, but they certainly have achieved the speedy trial portion of this. If this does go to trial, it goes to trial on January 5th. You talked about the perp walk. That didn't happen. James Comey was inside of that courtroom in Alexandria, Virginia, 20 minutes before the proceedings started, and you didn't see the tall guy leave court either. As you said, this all boils down to congressional testimony he gave in 2020 via Zoom, in which he was asked by lawmakers on Capitol Hill if he had given authorization for the leak of some information as related to the Clinton investigation into the Clinton Foundation. Now, he says that he did not lie to Congress. The administration and the Department of Justice says that that is the case, and they say that they have information to that effect. And in fact, they say they have some classified documents that point just to that. The judge said those classified documents better come to court with good timing.
Boy, so what's next in this case, Myles?
Yeah, so both sides will have to come back to court in just a few days, and those in that time they'll have to be able to, basically show what's in their discovery, what the government plans to put up, and then we'll see. He'll make this case that this is a vindictive prosecution, that they've made comments in the press that are detrimental to this case. We'll see what the judge says about that. We also should expect to see that in this case that his lawyers will make the case that the U.S. attorney in this case, who was previously a Trump lawyer, they had fired the career prosecutor. This person had never prosecuted a case. They'll say she is not properly appointed to the role, and that because on that grounds the case should be thrown out. That's one of the stickier topics. Vindictive prosecution also going to be tricky, but a speedy trial, January 5th, is when we expect both sides to come into court, and that's what James Comey wanted. He wanted a speedy trial in this case.
That's right. Bring it to trial. Myles Miller, our senior national security correspondent. Thank you, as always, Myles. Just moments ago, indeed, we spoke with the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, about the state of the government shutdown, now in its 8th day. Here's a taste of our conversation.
This is a very frustrating exercise for us. It's no fun at all, Joe, and that's because real Americans are feeling real harm because of this. It's political games being played by Democrats in the Senate. There is one reason and one reason alone that they have all just magically changed their tune. I mean, they've done a 180-degree turn from what they have always said and done emphatically in keeping the government open. They said as recently as March of this year, we're playing the highlight reel tape outside the Speaker's office right now. They all said in their own words, you can't shut the government down. It's too painful.
Back with us now, this evening's political panel, Bloomberg Politics contributor Adam Hodge, managing director at Bully Pulpit International, alongside Republican strategist Sarah Chamberlain from the Republican Main Street Partnership. Great to have you both back with us. You were watching and listening along with our conversation. Adam, there's a fundamental, not only lack of trust, but seeming misunderstanding between the two sides here. That didn't sound like we're getting any closer to a resolution. And the point that we frequently hear from Republicans that the Speaker just made is Democrats are going against their principles that have been expressed year after year by never closing the government for political advantage. How do you respond?
I think the key difference that Speaker Johnson is not including in his highlight reel, although I wouldn't call it much of a highlight reel, is the fact that the Republicans have so poisoned the well and there's no trust among Democrats that they will even stick to the things that they agree to in this quote-unquote clean CR. They claimed the CR back in March wasn't going to be much of a big deal, and then they fundamentally stripped a lot of the funding that some of these Democrats, who they're now begging to support this extension, they pulled it out and they cut that money. And so that is, I think, why you don't see Democrats jumping on board this time. It has nothing to do with Schumer's politics in New York. It doesn't have to do with anything else. I think it's about, can they trust the Republicans to actually have a vote on health care? And right now there's zero trust that that's going to happen.
When you consider the potential cost of a shutdown, Sarah, whether you've been Very quick to point out the impact on ancillary business. It's not just government workers we're talking about. This can have a pretty widespread impact on things. You wonder about how long this could go, what the impact would be, and what it would take lawmakers to come together at some point here, because nobody's talking. He hasn't met with Chuck Schumer since they were in the Oval Office.
Right. This is Chuck Schumer's shutdown. I mean, I totally disagree with you. I think he is petrified of what's going on in New York. And I don't know how this gets reopened. I mean, usually I can say here and say, okay, well, it's not going to be this bad. Yeah. And I don't know, because even the members of the Republican Main Street Partnership are terribly frustrated because you see what's going on in New York, and they really are blaming Chuck Schumer. He's afraid.
Do you regret the rescissions? When you consider the cost of the shutdown, we didn't pull back that much money in the rescissions, which really seemed to upset Democrats. Was that the sin that caused this shutdown?
No. It goes back to Chuck Schumer in March. I sat here in the chair. We saw it.
You did.
And he's afraid. I mean, he's afraid of the mayor candidate. He's afraid of AOC. He's afraid of what's going on in New York, and he doesn't want to have a bloody primary. I really think that's what this is, and there's a lot of Americans suffering. We gave him a clean CR. We don't do that often, but they got a clean CR, and they still turned it down. So this fight's really in the Senate.
All right, we'll have more time together before the program is over. Adam Hodge and Sarah Chamberlain, we thank you. And coming up, another important conversation as we continue our coverage of this shutdown. We'll get the view of the Senate when Republican Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota joins. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
I'm worried about all sorts of adverse effects because of how it affects the American people. We had some analysis today that every week that the Democrat shutdown continues, we could lose $15 billion in gross domestic product. I mean, it's a real hit for real people, and it has a reverberating effect. And if you keep it closed for a month, then one of the estimates I saw today is you lose 43,000 civilian employees, because it has a ripple effect throughout the economy. We can't afford to do that right now. Things were going in the right direction, and this is a terrible setback for the country. It also has implications for national security. I mean, you look at things like nuclear deterrence. Those programs are stalled right now, right? And every day you do that, it has real world consequences for us. Not a game, and we need to end it right now.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Part of my conversation earlier this hour with Speaker Mike Johnson, discussing, of course, what is next regarding this government shutdown. Now 8 days old and no signs of ending. Joining us live from Capitol Hill with the view from the Senate now. As we try to look ahead, Republican Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota. He's a member of both the Senate Appropriations Committee and Senate Banking Committee. We can add intel as well. Senator, it's great to see you. Thanks for being with us here on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm wondering your thoughts, because I know you've seen this movie a couple times before, but this one feels a little bit different. When you see members of Congress yelling at each other in the halls, as we saw on both sides of the Capitol today, and the lack of conversation between leaders on both sides of the aisle. What are we in for here?
It's not good. I think most people recognize that we'd much rather have this shutdown over with. Bottom line is right now I don't see an end in sight. Normally I'm one of the more optimistic guys. I try to work with folks on both sides of the aisle to talk about the path forward, but I'm afraid that part of what our Democrat colleagues wanted to do was to force a discussion with regard to the Affordable Care Act and the extensions with regard to supplemental funding for it, but that's going to take time to do. The program itself was broken to begin with, and we had hoped that perhaps we'd have enough time to actually put together a package, but with the shutdown in place and our demand very clearly that a clean CR was going to be a part of the package, I just don't see a path forward right now that's going to get this thing shut down or to get this shutdown over with in a timely fashion. It's not good for the country. It most certainly is not good for the military, where their paychecks are going to be stopped now. And along with that, we're going to have a lot of folks out there that normally do essential types of operations that are going to have to stay on and work, and there simply is no way to get them paid without opening up the government again. It's not a good time.
Well, You sound frustrated, and for obvious reasons, Senator. The government, to my understanding, would have to reopen by October 13th for members of the military to hit their pay cycle on the 15th. You clearly don't expect that to happen. Would you support a standalone piece of legislation to keep paying the troops, maybe out of the money allotted for the Pentagon in the president's big, beautiful bill?
I wish I could say yes, but the answer has got to be no. And here's the reason why. There's other people within government that are also suffering, and it simply allows our Democrat colleagues to continue on with a shutdown that impacts a lot of other things as well. And for that reason, look, I think the cleanest thing on this is just a flat out, clean, straightforward, without anything attached to it, a continuing resolution until the 21st of November. That would have given us the opportunity to actually get the rest of our appropriation bills done. We were so close. We had bipartisan support for 3 bills that have already passed out of the Senate. We've got 3 more bills, bipartisan support, ready to come to the floor of the Senate. Almost 85% of the entire budget could have been done without this shutdown. And so for me, it's very discouraging. This is the one thing Senator Thune honestly told him. He said, I will open this up. I will do this on a bipartisan basis. We'll get this done. And then to have a shutdown demanded. And by the way, their demand on this thing here is eliminate everything that was basically in the reconciliation bill. Spend as a part of a commitment to do a 30-day extension under their conditions. They wanted $1.5 trillion of guaranteed expenditures built into it. And that's no way to start this conversation. And we've now had 6 different votes on their proposal and on our proposal. Our proposal was straightforward, no special Republican demands in it, just continue this funding. And by the way, this funding is funding that was set up under the Biden administration. And President Trump, to his credit, said, look, let's get through the rest of this year. Let's do a continuing resolution until the end of the year. They voted for it in March. And now here we come up to this point, and they think they can hold us hostage. And it frustrates the heck out of me. I'm one of the guys who said, look, I will work with you on what you want to get done, but let's open this government up. And so far, I'm afraid we're running out of time.
I want to ask you about those other federal workers you refer to, though, Senator, those who have been furloughed. There are questions about whether they will all get back pay when the government reopens, assuming it will. It's codified in law, to my understanding, the Government Employee Fair Treatment Act of 2019 that President Trump signed in his first term would dictate that furloughed workers automatically are compensated for shutdowns. Based on my conversation earlier this hour with the Speaker of the House and what we've heard from the administration, this may still be a question. Is this up for debate as far as you're concerned?
I don't think so. I think the law is pretty clear. But here's the part that I think the Speaker may have been alluding to. At any time during this time period, if the president says, look, this is going to go on for an extended period of time, I'm not going to pay these folks if they're not going to be here. And he may very well say that furlough ends on a particular day. And at that point on, we're going to terminate these folks from future funding because they're no longer going to be considered an employee. That's a possibility.
I see.
And once again, the president doesn't want to do this stuff. I mean, he's the guy that actually has been trying to stay out of the battle so that we could actually resolve the stuff without getting people more agitated than what they are already. And so far, he hasn't been threatening to fire people. He has not fired these folks. And so I just think we're running out of time. Clearly, these federal, I mean, look, we've got our own Senate employees who are not going to be getting paid. So, I mean, we feel it. And I'm just hoping that our Democrat colleagues say, you know what, we've tried it. We are running out of time. And the issue that they really said that they cared about, which was the Obamacare additional subsidies, they're basically past the point where they're even going to be able to do any good because there's no way to write legislation at this stage of the game, at this late stage of the game, that's going to be able to impact rates for next year. And it's very, very unfortunate.
Republican Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota, I appreciate your being with us, Senator, and I hope we have better things to talk about next time. As we turn back to this evening's political panel, Bloomberg Politics contributor Adam Hodge, our Democratic strategist, alongside Republican strategist Sarah Chamberlain from the Republican Main Street Partnership. Another discouraged lawmaker with us on the air here, and it doesn't sound like we're any closer today. In fact, we might be further apart. Adam, is that possible than we were, say, a week ago?
I mean, it's hard to say that we're further apart. I mean, we were pretty far apart a week ago. I think the one thing that, as far as Democrats are concerned, it's clear. The way out of this shutdown is to negotiate with Democrats on health care. That is the key that unlocks this shutdown. Mm-hmm. And I think the Republicans should just recognize that Democrats, I think there's just hope that they're just bluffing, that they'll eventually, like, the politics are with us on this side. When we're talking about health care, Democrats are on the offense. And that's what we're doing right now. And so, but putting aside the politics, it's also good for the American people to actually fix this problem that the Republicans created in the first place. That's why Democrats don't feel that the need to try to do anything else. Come to the table and negotiate on this.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, you understand this process as well as anyone. As you consider the CR that would expire on the 21st of November, or I guess the 22nd, that brings us to Thanksgiving. Even if everybody gets on the same page by next week or the week after, what happens after Thanksgiving? Are we somehow going to figure regular order to fund the government for the next or rest of this fiscal year?
The senator is right. We're starting to run out of time.
Yeah.
I mean, and
we could have another shutdown.
We could have another shutdown. And he's right. I mean, the bills are there in a very bipartisan way. They've come out of the House. They're sitting in the Senate. They've passed. It would be very nice to have regular order. It's been years since we've had regular order.
Yeah, I wouldn't recognize
but I think we're really running out of time on that. And this is the Democrats. And now the Democrats on the 18th, they're going to do some rally that we don't want a king. They don't intend to open up this government anytime soon. What they're doing is trying to build their popularity from down in the very low numbers, and they're trying to get up into at least into the 20s. That's really what this is. They're trying to fire up their base and become more popular, and they don't really care that the American people are struggling and suffering.
I hope that's not the case, but I wonder at what point this continuing resolution is junk. I mean, at what point, several more weeks go by, what's the point of passing a CR to get us through another couple of weeks so we can fight again? Will this need to be extended in itself? We need a later date?
I mean, you can always rework the date on the CR if you needed to.
Then you need to bring the House back.
Well, Mike Johnson should have done that a long time ago, but we don't, that's maybe a conversation for another day.
But we've done our job.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no sense to bring them back.
Well, but I think
nothing to vote on.
But in the House, but the Senate, you need 60 votes, and the Democrats are not. There's not 60 votes in the Senate for a clean CR. That's just the math of where we are, right? And I think Democrats feel like this issue is trending in their direction. 80% of Americans want the ACA subsidies extended. They feel like there's polling that shows that Democrats are on the offense on this issue, and when we're talking about health care, we're winning. That's the political argument. Mm-hmm. But I think these ACA subsidies, Mike Rounds and the speaker were talking about, 10 million plus people signed up for the ACA with these enhanced subsidies in the last 4 years. So you're talking, like, if you eliminate them, that really throws 10 million people plus their health care in jeopardy.
Yeah.
I don't think the Republicans want to be the party of getting rid of
that's the
costs.
point. I feel like, and you've talked about the bill that I think it's Rep. Higgins put forth.
It is.
It does seem like both sides are actually not that far apart on this, that this has become a process and sequencing issue. Is that fair?
I really think if we had done the extension, we would have gotten the ACA fix done. It's there. The members of Main Street are willing to work on it. It's a bipartisan bill. The Senate has talked about introducing, again, a bipartisan bill on this. So why we're in shutdown over ACA extensions?
And we got Marjorie Taylor Greene getting on board with the ACA. So, we can find it.
We need to get everyone around this table to figure it out. With Adam Hodge and Sarah Chamberlain, thank you both. And thank you for being with us on Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. This is Bloomberg.